Walk into almost any grocery store or tea shop today, and you'll find shelves filled with teas making all kinds of promises. Green tea, black tea, matcha, white tea, oolong, herbal blends. And if you're trying to make tea part of a healthier daily routine, you might naturally wonder, which one should I be drinking? Is green tea the healthiest? Is matcha even better? What about black tea? Or should you skip caffeine altogether and drink herbal tea? It's a simple question, but the answer is more interesting than you might expect. Welcome back to TeaMinded. I'm glad you're here. Today we're exploring what might be the healthiest tea to drink every day, and why the answer may have less to do with finding one perfect tea, and more to do with finding the right tea for you. Let's begin with something important. There probably isn't a single healthiest tea. Tea isn't medicine, and no particular variety is going to transform your health simply because you drink a cup every morning. But tea can absolutely be part of a healthy daily routine, and different teas bring different characteristics to the cup. So let's look at some of the most popular choices. We should probably begin with the tea that gets the most attention, green tea. Green tea comes from the Camellia sinensis plant, the same plant that gives us black tea, white tea, oolong, and other true teas. What makes green tea different is primarily the way the leaves are processed. After harvesting, the leaves are heated relatively quickly to limit oxidation. That helps preserve their green color and many of their distinctive characteristics. Green tea contains naturally occurring plant compounds called polyphenols. Among the best known are catechins, including one you may have heard of called EGCG. These compounds have been studied extensively, which is one reason green tea is so often associated with health and wellness. But green tea isn't one thing. A Japanese sencha can be fresh, grassy, vegetal, sometimes savory. A Chinese green tea may be softer, sweeter, or more nutty. The category contains an enormous range of flavors. And that's important, because if you're going to drink a tea every day, you should actually enjoy drinking it. Then there is matcha. Matcha is also green tea, but it's consumed differently. Instead of steeping tea leaves in water and removing them, matcha is made from specially grown and processed tea leaves that are ground into a very fine powder. When you drink matcha, you're consuming the powdered leaf itself. That gives matcha its distinctive concentration of flavor. It also means matcha can contain more caffeine than many conventionally brewed green teas, depending on how much powder you use. For some people, that's exactly what they're looking for. Matcha can become a morning alternative to coffee. It offers caffeine along with L-theanine, an amino acid naturally found in tea. Many matcha drinkers describe the experience as focused but calm, alert without feeling quite as stimulated as they sometimes do after coffee. Of course, caffeine affects everyone differently. If you're sensitive to caffeine, matcha may not be the best choice late in the day. What about black tea? Black tea sometimes gets overlooked in conversations about healthy tea because green tea receives so much attention. But black tea also contains naturally occurring polyphenols. The difference is that black tea is more fully oxidized during processing. That changes both its chemistry and its flavor. Black tea tends to be richer, deeper, sometimes malty, sometimes fruity, sometimes brisk. If you enjoy a strong morning beverage, black tea can be an excellent everyday choice. And for someone trying to replace a heavily sweetened coffee drink or soda with something simpler, an unsweetened black tea may be a very practical option. Then we have white tea. White tea is often described as one of the least processed categories of tea. It is typically made from young buds and leaves that are allowed to wither and dry with relatively minimal processing. The result can be delicate, sweet, floral, sometimes almost honey-like. White tea also contains naturally occurring polyphenols and caffeine, although caffeine levels can vary significantly depending on the particular tea and how it is brewed. That's worth remembering. We sometimes hear broad rules like green tea has this much caffeine, black tea has that much, white tea has almost none, but tea doesn't always behave that neatly. Cultivar matters, growing conditions matter, harvesting matters, the amount of leaf matters, water temperature matters, steeping time matters. The cup you actually brew is more important than the category printed on the package. Oolong is another interesting everyday option. Oolong tea sits somewhere between green and black tea in terms of oxidation, although that description doesn't begin to capture how diverse the category really is. Some oolongs are light and floral. Others are deeply roasted, creamy, fruity, mineral, almost toasty. One reason I particularly enjoy oolong as a tea category is that many oolongs perform beautifully across multiple infusions. You can brew the same leaves several times and notice how the flavor changes from one cup to the next. For someone who wants tea to be both a daily beverage and a daily ritual, oolong has a lot to offer. And then we come to herbal tea. Technically, herbal teas aren't true teas because they don't come from Camellia sinensis. They're more accurately called herbal infusions or tisanes. Chamomile, peppermint, rooibos, ginger, hibiscus, and countless blends of herbs, flowers, roots, fruits, and spices. One of the great advantages of many herbal teas is that they're naturally caffeine-free. That makes them particularly useful later in the day. You might drink green tea in the morning, oolong in the afternoon, and chamomile or rooibos in the evening. Tea doesn't have to be an either-or decision. Different teas can serve different moments. So, if we had to choose the healthiest tea to drink every day, what would it be? For many people, green tea is certainly a strong candidate because of the extensive research surrounding its naturally occurring compounds. Matcha offers another interesting option because you consume the powdered tea leaf itself. Black tea also contains beneficial plant compounds and may be particularly appealing to people who prefer a stronger cup. And caffeine-free herbal infusions can be useful for people who want something warm and flavorful without additional caffeine. But perhaps we're asking the wrong question. Instead of asking, what is the healthiest tea? Maybe the better question is, what tea can I enjoy consistently as part of a healthy life? Because the tea with the most impressive list of potential benefits isn't particularly useful if you don't enjoy drinking it. A tea you genuinely look forward to is much more likely to become part of your life. And there's another part of this conversation that I think matters: how you drink your tea. If your tea contains several spoonfuls of sugar, or becomes a large drink filled with syrups, sweeteners, and cream, then you're no longer talking about tea in quite the same way. That doesn't mean you can never enjoy a sweetened tea. Of course you can. But if health is your primary goal, one of the simplest approaches is also one of the oldest. Tea, water, perhaps nothing else. There is something refreshing about that simplicity. A few leaves, good water, a few minutes, and a cup. And as we discussed in the last episode, the benefits of drinking tea every day aren't necessarily limited to what happens inside the cup. There is also the ritual. Making tea can create a natural pause. You stop what you're doing, heat the water, measure the leaves, wait for the infusion, sit down, take a sip. Maybe the healthiest thing about your afternoon tea isn't a particular antioxidant. Maybe it's the fact that for 10 minutes, you stopped. You stepped away from the screen, you weren't answering messages, you weren't scrolling, you weren't trying to accomplish 3 things at once. You simply made tea and drank it. Health is complicated. It involves nutrition, movement, sleep, relationships, stress, attention, and many other things that no single beverage can solve. Tea can be part of that larger picture, not because tea is magic, but because a good daily habit can support other good habits. Perhaps your morning sencha replaces a sugary drink. Perhaps matcha becomes a more enjoyable way to begin your workday. Perhaps an afternoon oolong gives you a reason to step away from your desk. Perhaps an herbal tea becomes part of the way you slow things down in the evening. Different teas, different moments, different purposes. And that may ultimately be the best answer to the question we started with. What is the healthiest tea to drink every day? There isn't one perfect answer. Green tea is excellent. Matcha is fascinating. Black tea deserves more credit than it sometimes receives. Oolong offers extraordinary variety. White tea can be wonderfully delicate. And herbal infusions give us an entire world beyond traditional tea. You don't have to choose just one. Explore. Pay attention to how different teas make you feel. Notice which flavors you enjoy. Notice when caffeine works for you and when it doesn't. And find the teas that naturally fit into the rhythm of your life. Because perhaps the healthiest tea isn't simply the one with the most impressive compounds. It's the tea that helps you create a daily practice you actually enjoy. One that encourages you to slow down, drink something simple, pay attention, and perhaps take slightly better care of yourself along the way. As TeaMinded continues, we'll keep exploring tea culture, craftsmanship, tea rituals, mindfulness, and intentional living through the lens of tea. But today, I hope this episode encourages you not to search endlessly for the perfect tea. Instead, find a few good teas you love, brew them well, and enjoy them often. Thank you for listening to TeaMinded. If you enjoyed this episode, follow the podcast on Spotify and share it with someone who loves tea, wellness, daily rituals, or simply discovering better ways to enjoy the everyday. And until next time, put the kettle on, find the tea that works for you, and stay tea-minded.